Okay. So what I said is that in the lower limb area, lower limb musculature, we have a collection of muscles altogether. They are known as the adductor group. In fact, since the lower limb is present in the body to perform the function of, say, weight bearing or say supporting the entire body, muscles mostly in the lower limb come in groups. So one such group is the adductor group. I think you have also heard the term hamstring, didn't you, Deva? I mean, people who play cricket should be hearing this
Yes.
term hamstring, because most often you find your favorite cricketers getting injured by a hamstring tear. Now, this word hamstring itself refers to a group. Clear? Group means what? More than one muscle contributing either to a similar function or occupying a similar location. That is why we are using the word group. From the functional perspective, one example is the one that you can now see on your screen. This is a functional limb. That means this entire group helps to adduct. I think you know what is adduction? This is abduction, a movement of a limb away from the body. You can see this movement. And the opposite movement, that means the movement which brings a limb towards the midline of the body, this one is known as the adduction. Clear? Abduction and adduction is clear. Is this clear? To respond. Otherwise, how will I come to know whether it is clear to you or not? Is it clear? Did you understood? Did you understand what is adduction? Somebody at least switch,
Yes, sir.
unmute your microphone and.
Sir, once again, can you repeat?
Okay, so you have to tell me, otherwise how will I come to know? I mean, if you're not telling me your problems, I will proceed to the next part. So one part remains problematic to you. Okay, I basically was speaking of two different movements. Consider that there is an imaginary, not real one, a midline that separates the body into the bilaterally symmetrical halves. Right. So a movement can either bring a body part closer to this imaginary midline, or it can do otherwise. I mean, the movement can bring a body part away from this imaginary midline. Are you understanding what I'm trying to say? I mean, let me explain then once more. If this be a human being, so this was the torso. Now, consider the position of the arms that I've shown. So if these are the arms, I said the body can be imaginarily be divided into the two symmetrical halves by a midline, right? This is an imaginary midline, not a real one. So the arm position can either be something, say, outstretched. So this is an outstretched arm position. I have stretched my arm both ways. This is an outstretched. So this position is termed as an abducted position. What is it known as? Abducted. B-U-C-T-E-D. I mean, the movement which caused the arm to move outside, this particular movement is known as the abduction. So if I have kept my arm stretched, the very next moment, I need to bring my arms closer, right? So a movement, something like this, that I'm going to show you in the dotted line. So see, the movement can either be in this direction or the movement can be in this direction. Now, let me name this direction. The direction one that is shown here brings a part of the arm away from the midline. Clear? Did you understand that? If I am moving it, this is the arm is moving apart away from the midline. Right or not? What? Nobody responds.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
And if I level the other direction as direction number 2, so in this direction number 2, what is happening is this outstretched arm is coming closer to the midline. So the angle that is present in this axilla area is getting reduced. So these are the two movements. I mean, abduction and adduction movements are so very common movements that when you will learn ocular motility on the third semester, you will again face these two terms. Okay. So abduction is the movement number 1. This movement is the abduction. I would again, though this is a repeat part of our video, but I would again ask you to focus your attention on the spelling. Here the spelling is having a B, but the movement number 2 is known as, what is it known as? Adduction. A-D-D-U-C-T-I-O-N. Adduction. So what is the difference in the spelling? Again, in the second place, the alphabet is only the difference. One movement is abduction, another movement is adduction. Now, since we need to keep our leg almost always closer to the midline, otherwise you would not be able to stand. I mean, in order to retain the stability of our posture, it is necessary that we keep our lower limbs vertical almost always. And when you are standing simply, even when you are sitting, you will find that we do not stretch our legs much. Okay, now, I mean, if we are sitting on the ground, then at times we need to stretch the thighs on the side. But rest of the times, when you are sitting on a chair or standing or walking, in all these conditions, the thigh remains closer to the midline. That means it is a necessity for maintaining the stability of our posture. So to keep anything closer to the midline, the movement that is required is obviously which one? Not the abduction, but the adduction. Because just observe here that this adduction movement would draw a limb closer to the midline. Right? Did you understand now? What is adduction and why adducted state is necessary for the thigh area? Now, being the adducted state more necessary, the muscles here are outnumbering the other muscles which can cause abduction. So those muscles which keep the lower limb in the adducted state are collectively termed as the adductor group. Understood? What is the adductor group?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did Syed say no or yes? I didn't get you, Syed.
Sir, group ব্যাপারটা বুঝতে পারিনি।
Group ব্যাপারটা বুঝতে পারলেন। Group মানেটা কি? Collection. Collection of more than one thing is known as the group. Right. So here I am referring to a collection of muscles. অনেকগুলো muscles একসাথে হলো, collection হলো। যে muscles গুলোর ফাংশনটা similar function. What is that function? That function is to keep the thigh in the adducted state. Yeah. So entirely, those collection of muscles together are thus to be termed as adductor group. So this particular name is based on the function. Again, there is another criteria of naming. As for example, one muscle is named as Gluteus Group. So in the Gluteus Group, we are having a set of 3 different muscles. Okay, now the Gluteus Group is a group of muscles, 3 muscles, Gluteus maximus, Gluteus minimus, Gluteus medius. All these 3 muscles are present just behind the hip bone. Hip bone, mone ache? Pelvic bone, iliac part, ischium. These are the parts, pubis. These are the parts of the hip bone. Present just behind the hip bone is this gluteus group. So this gluteus, I mean, sometimes even the gym people call it as glute, simply as glute. This gluteus group, again, is the major abductor, but we do not call this as an abductor. Rather, the name is by location out here. So one name was by the function, that is the function of adduction. Another name that I'm giving here as an example is by the location. Okay, so the location is the glutes area. Glutes means the behind the pelvic bone. Understood? Which part? Okay. Then there is obviously the hamstring group, which actually refers to the back of the thigh. Okay. So this is how different muscles in the lower limb are present. Now, in order to study the lower limb, we would divide this entire area into few parts. So what are those parts? Let us have a look of the different parts in which the muscles of the lower limb can be studied. First, I will refer to this area, which is known as the gluteus or the gluteal region. We will call this as the gluteal region. বাংলায় যেটাকে অনেকে পাছা বা এরকম একটা কিছু বলে, behind the pelvic bone, that is the gluteal region. Okay. So very important region because it contributes to the stability of the entire upper part of the body. Okay. So in this gluteal region, let me bring a diagram onto this particular screen, which will be helpful to understand the gluteus muscle. Okay, first comes the orientation part. We can see in this diagram part of the hip bone. Do consider keeping the videos on. I mean, everybody switched off the video. That is, I mean, everybody should be keeping it on instead of. See, one thing, since the rule is to keep the video on throughout the class, since this is going to be posted in the YouTube, at any point of time, if the college authorities or if some other person sees that the class is being conducted without any video on, in that case, there can be a complaint both against you people as well as to me, because I should have been insisting you to keep the video on, but you are keeping it off now and then, thus wasting the time. So in order to avoid this waste of time by repeatedly asking the video on, keep it on throughout the class. Well, let us now focus on which part in this diagram is exhibiting the hip bone. I'm drawing the part of the hip bone. This is the back side of the hip bone. Okay, because the gluteal region itself refers to the back of the hip bone. I think you remember the hip bone, or do you want me to show you the hip bone once more?
So you can show once again.
Just a minute. Do follow up every classes in order to avoid repetitions, okay?
স্যার পৌলমীকে একবার অ্যালাউ করুন।
Yes, since I am not directly able to collect a diagram, I will collect the picture directly from the internet just to give you the idea and just to avoid the loss of the time. So this diagram I have been collecting from the iStock website. I will be putting this diagram onto the board. So this is the entire hip bone structure. I mean, part of the ligaments are also demonstrated in this diagram. And this diagram is showing the structure from the back part. I mean, it's giving you the back view. Now, the diagram that I have shown before, which is showing you the 3 different gluteus muscles, is present on the back. So individual muscles are cut. That means you will consider that there are 3 muscles. The 3 muscles are present in layers, and each layer partly superimposes on another layer. All the 3 muscles are finally inserted into this greater trochanter part. All the 3 muscles, though, are finally inserted into this common part, but as this muscle will contract, this is the origin of the muscle, and this point is the, I am writing here as only I, that is reflecting the insertion of the muscle. So as this muscle will contract, what will happen is there will be a pull all in this direction, right? So if the muscle gets pulled in this direction, the natural consequence is that whatever the structure present below this area will move this way, right? So that is why we will be able to abduct. We will be able to stretch our leg. Because if the limb moves in this direction, that means this is a movement away from the midline. Are you getting me? এটা যদি আমার leg হয়, if this is the leg, and if the leg moves in this direction, that means this is an abduction. Abduction. Think and say whether are you getting this concept or not. If I show you this diagram again, suppose there is a muscle in the green color. So this is where I am labeling. This muscle is having the direction something like this. Let me brighten my ink. I'm speaking of this. If there be a muscle attached to this part of the femur, this is the greater trochanter of the femur, and if the fibers of this muscle are having this orientation, so this is the origin, and if this be the insertion, I think you already know what is origin and insertion. Do you know it? If you do not know what origin and insertion is, then you will not be able to understand. And exactly for that reason, I was asking you to go through my old videos, which is having a very clear explanation of both the origin as well as the insertion. So do you know what origin and insertion is? Let me first get that confirmation from you, sir. Otherwise, this is actually getting useless to speak of this. This class actually is very silent. This class doesn't want to speak up. I don't know why. I'm waiting for your response before moving further. is my speaker for which I cannot hear anything. Okay. Okay, somebody speak something just to confirm that is. I couldn't hear anybody's voice.
Can somebody speak at least something so as to get a confirmation that you are speaking?
Hello.
Okay, Rahul, thank you for the confirmation. I have heard your voice. Anyways, just confirm whether you do know the concept of origin and insertion. If you do not know the concept of origin and insertion, then actually it is very useless wastage of time to speak of these things. Do you know origin and insertion? Yes or no? I need that confirmation. I would rather.
Yes, sir.
You know origin and insertion. So whenever there is a movement, is it the origin that moves towards the insertion, or is it the insertion that moves towards origin? Which one is correct?
Sir, origin is the muscle attachment which is static in a movement, and the insertion moves towards the origin.
Correct. So if that be the case, that means this part where all the fibers are inserted, this part on contraction would move towards this iliac bone. This is the ilium, that is the part of the pelvic bone. So when the gluteal group will contract, since the gluteal group muscle is having the origin in the pelvic bone, so when these will contract, the result of this contraction is that this part of the femur bone, this is the femur bone, and the name of this part, as you can see here, it is written very clearly, greater trochanter. So this greater trochanter would thus tend to move in this direction. Let me draw the direction in a different color. Did you understand? Yes or no? I have every time to ask you yes or no. Did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the femur being the hip bone, so I mean the femur being the thigh bone, if I draw from this femur, what I will get is the leg. So with the contractions of this gluteus group, what will happen to this leg? Will it get abducted or will it remain adducted?
So if it moves away from the medial portion, then it will be abducted.
Think and say the leg will be abducted or adducted on the contractions of the gluteus group of muscle that is shown in this diagram in the green color annotation.
Okay, sir.
Okay means what? Will it be abducted or will it get adducted?
So adducted Adducted.
Adducted. So what is the concept of adduction? Is it movement towards the midline or movement away from the midline?
Movement towards the midline.
In the concept of adduction, do we have the movement away from the midline or towards the midline? That is what I'm asking.
So adduction is a concept in which the movement is towards the midline.
Are you getting my question? At the very beginning of today's class, I explained the concept of adduction and abduction. Now I am asking questions regarding that same thing that I have explained before in the beginning part of today's class. That is, in adduction, whether a body part moves towards the midline or away from the midline. Do you want me to repeat the question? Do you want me to repeat the question?
No,
Do you want me to repeat the question?
no, sir.
Do you want me to repeat the question? Shall I repeat the question? আমি কি কোয়েশ্চেনটাকে আবার বলবো? কারোর কাছ থেকে কোনো আনসারস পাচ্ছি না, অদ্ভুত ব্যাপার।
Yes, sir.
Let me test my mic, my speakers again. The speaker is not tested. So do you want me to repeat the question? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What I am asking is that in adduction, whether a body part moves towards the midline or away from the midline. I am stuck in that same old concept right from the beginning of the class, and the class is about to come to an end. In adduction, do the body part move away from the midline or closer to the midline? Now, did you get the question?
Sir, away from the midline.
Okay. So in adduction, you are telling that the movement is away.
No, sir.
Sir,
Adduction.
In
movement.
adduction towards, in abduction away.
Correct.
Yes, sir. Abduction.
Yes, sir.
Correct. So I probably then heard you wrong in the first one. So with the contraction of this gluteus group, what will happen to these legs? Will it get abducted or will it get adducted? As this gluteus muscle contracts, will the leg be adducted? Abducted. Correct. Understood now? After such a long time? Finally,
Yes,
you have
sir.
understood that there will be an abduction of the leg by the contractions of the gluteus group. And consider that at the same time, if I need to adduct the leg, in that case, the muscles that should be assisting in the movement of adduction should be present then onto the medial surface of this bone. If I say extrapolate this femur, if I draw this femur downwards, if this be the bone, then this is the lateral surface and this be the medial surface. So if on the lateral aspect an abduction motion is produced, that means naturally the adductor group should be present in the medial surface. So this is the adductor group. And the adductor group would also have the muscles oriented in this direction. So when the muscle contracts, the leg now get adducted. And that's why this entire group of muscles is collectively termed as adductor group, though we will study this adductor group when we will study the musculature of the thigh area. As of now, we are studying the musculature of only the gluteal area. Clear? Is the concept now clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what other muscles are present apart from the gluteus group. Now, in the gluteus group, if you observe that there are three muscles, one is the gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and gluteus minimus. Now, this same hip bone, which is shown here in this particular diagram without any muscles, if on this hip bone we cover up the bone with muscles, then this is the appearance that we are supposed to get. Do not consider that these are the whole muscles. In fact, the gluteus maximus muscle and the gluteus medius muscle has been sectioned so as to expose the muscles underlying the gluteus medius. That means what? If say this is one layer, if I place another layer on top of it, will it be visible for you to see the layer that is present behind? Suppose say the bigger layer is placed in front of the smaller layer. So can you now see the cell phone now? Is it possible for you to see the cell phone?
No, sir.
It's not possible because this is covered by a bigger layer. The cell phone is covered by a bigger layer. Similarly, the gluteus minimus is a small layer. Though it is a small layer, but